How's the connection? Rishi, do you hear me fine?
I can hear you fine.
Perfect. All right. So why don't we get started?
We can do that.
All right. Hey, everyone. Glad for joining us on this webinar where we're looking to build a high converting homepage for your e-commerce site. I have the huge honor of having Rishi Rawat with us today. Rishi, maybe you want to give us a quick intro, but before you do, I just want to sing his praises a little bit. We had a podcast episode, I think about a week and a half ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rishi. And
Correct.
we had a fantastic conversation. So we'll be publishing that episode really soon. So if you like the content, he's just really going to give you a quick teaser today on all his wealth of experience in A/B testing different types of copy and seeing how it works. And you'll get the full deal on the podcast episode. But already this is going to be, I think, a really awesome introduction to Rishi. But Rishi, maybe just tell everybody who you are and
Sure. Thanks for that. Thanks for that introduction. Or queuing up. My name is Rishi, and I've been very curious. I would say if I was defining myself, I would say I'm extremely curious about the choices people make. Why do we choose certain brands? How do we buy home appliances? What anxiety and concerns go through our mind? Because a lot of those things are subconscious, and I'm really interested in understanding some of those subconscious drivers or cues that we take.
that's pretty much what we all want to do as marketers and as people online, right? Because it's such a very different medium that it's all about trying to find, everything that you do on the physical side of things may not necessarily translate so well online. And a little bit about me. I'm the co-founder of DataQ. So I have a background where I used to work at TripAdvisor as a data scientist, where I did really a lot of work on optimization. And one of the things which really intrigued me was that all these really large companies who are so good at optimizing your online experience, I felt that a lot more could be done to share this knowledge and help smaller and medium businesses achieve the same thing. So with that, hopefully quick introduction, I think let's get into it. So today, we're going to talk about a few things. Really, rather than having this massive discussion on everything with e-commerce, we've decided to focus really on your homepage. And in this case, you can define the homepage as any landing page, right? But necessarily your homepage. And we'll talk about a few topics. So one is why it's important. I think this is a bit of a truism, but I'm sure it is something which you need to think about in terms of priorities because you're working on so many things. And what does the anatomy of a winning homepage look like? What are the components? Hopefully, this will give you. I don't want to say that this is something which is exactly what you should be doing, but take some inspirations from it because everyone is unique. So you might have certain segments that you think are needed for your business. And then this is where the master himself comes in for copywriting, and he'll be sharing with you some of his, I'd say, like tips on how you can do better with your copywriting. And the next part, I think, is a very important segment which doesn't really get as much in detail or attention as I'd like it to be. It's that the only person who can give you the best feedback is your own customer. The only problem is it's notoriously hard to do that. And I'm going to share with you some examples on some websites I've seen that have done a really good job, and hopefully you can emulate that. And lastly, we'll talk about personalization, which is how to treat each customer as an individual. Because as we know in this current context, people are so different. They come in with very different biases. So it makes sense that you're able to tailor your homepage to speak to each person as best as you could. So let's get into it. I promise to try to keep this as short as possible and do sound out on the comments. if you have any questions. Even if you're rewatching this later, we do monitor the comment thread, so feel free to ask, and Rishi and I will do our best to respond. So, I mean, let's start with altruism. So, if this was your homepage, would you enter? And maybe if you like a lot of pain and you're a masochist, you might say yes, but I'd say generally no, right? And there's some very clear reasons to that. On the online, we call this a bounce rate. Bounce rate is basically where someone comes in and they visit your homepage, they don't take any action, and then they leave. That's declared a bounce rate. And the thing is that if you have a bad experience, it leads to a high bounce rate. And this is a massive waste, right? Because assuming that your bounce rate is high, say 60%, 70%, that means every dollar you're spending on a Facebook ad, every dollar you're spending on a really cool blog post, 60% of those people are not even looking at what you did and they're leaving. That, I mean, already that is a huge waste, and it's a massive area that you can already optimize, right? So um, what we've done here is just try to simplify this by saying the each page on your e-commerce site has a very specific goal, and so it's important to keep that in mind when you're designing for it. So obviously, for instance, if you're looking at a product page, it's really to inform a customer who is a little bit further down the funnel, so to speak, and they want to know what about the product. But the homepage is not to do that. Your homepage is a little bit like that store I showed you a little bit earlier. It's just really saying, come inside, see what I have to offer. And that's so the goal is really is to have as many visitors as possible to take an action. To come inside on an online sense is really to click, right? Or to view something. And then you have the opportunity to communicate a little bit more. If you don't do that and they don't give you that click and they leave, you've lost them before you even had a chance to tell them who you are. So today we're really trying to see how do you do that. So let's have a quick look at the anatomy of a winning homepage. Um, in this part, I've taken this really good diagram by the folks from Core DNA. I'd encourage you to check out that whole article. The link is below. They've done an anatomy of all the very important pages of your homepage. I've made a few additions, which I'll walk you through. In this case, the search bar here is obviously a very important segment. I would say that you don't need to worry about the search bar if you've got very few products, so maybe 5 or 10, and then you can feature them all, so then search is not that important. But even in this case, the thing with Google being so famous and so popular, people automatically go to the search bar. Even if you have very few products, it's still helpful because we are really suckers of convention. We always do what looks familiar to us. So a website which doesn't have a search bar already might have people with muscle memory going there and being like, oh, there's no search bar. And that's another part which is very important in terms of muscle memory. Don't try to be creative with where you put the search bar. I mean, luckily, I haven't seen too many examples of people putting it all over the place. But if you are trying to be creative, please don't be creative with where the search bar is. Try to keep it on the top right, at least in the top, because that's where people look for it. The next thing I would say is probably the most important thing of your entire homepage, which is your value proposition. Now, you've probably heard this in many, many blogs that you've written, or perhaps any kind of material or anyone you've talked to. But the thing is that when you talk about doing a very good value proposition, it's easy for someone like me to say that, but it's actually very hard to write it. So, my friend Rishi here made a really good post on LinkedIn probably about 10 minutes ago saying something like, Rishi, what was that? Where you said your copywriting V1
Oh
will
yeah, the
up your
version one of copywriting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just say that for everybody now. I
Sure,
think that's a
sure.
really good point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of, it. I'm just saying the version one of the copy that you write is probably going to be objectively terrible, and it really starts getting interesting by version 4.5 or something. And so, don't get married to version one too soon.
Exactly. And I think that's such a great way of looking at how to write a good value proposition because number one, people will always keep drilling into you that your value proposition is very important. It's the most critical thing that you write. But I don't want you to look at that or think about that statement and get into this analysis paralysis where you don't think you're good enough to get started. Like, do what you can to communicate what you do. There's so much material out there that I don't want to waste time telling you how to write a good value proposition. But find something that makes sense for you. And then, later on in this webinar, we'll be talking about how to talk to customers and things like that. And then you can keep revising it. And just like Rishi so wisely said, you'll get to your version 4.5 eventually. And that's when you'll start to feel very comfortable with it.
And
Go
Shriram,
ahead.
if
I
you
think,
don't mind, I'd like to add something very quickly over here because I think it's
yeah,
really
yeah, go for it. Go for
so,
it.
the value, it's really paradoxical in a weird way. The entrepreneur or the business owner might actually not be in the best position to craft the value proposition because they're in the eye of the storm. It's really,
Mm.
really hard for them to actually to talk about their value proposition. It seems so, it's very hard. I struggle with it too. And one of the ideas that I have is that actually use an outsider, especially your customers, especially people who have just bought your product. And if you were to kind of maybe create some email communication with them and say, why did you buy my product? They would actually give you nuggets that would actually be the core of your value proposition. So anyway.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can't sort of stress that enough. That the people, because you're writing the value proposition for your customer. That's for them to for you to introduce yourself to them. And what better way to introduce yourself to your customer than by using his or her own words, right? That's really um, so. The next thing, which I've seen a few examples where this is not um, it could have been done a little bit better. And it's actually one of the things I added to this diagram. So if you go to the CodeDNA blog, you won't see this text. It's a call to action. So you could have the best copy, but people are naturally lazy, and you need to give them something to do. So in this case, you generally, what I've seen is, talking to a lot of e-commerce merchants, you even if you have a really good value proposition, you basically have two kinds of visitors. A lot of people spend time crafting the homepage experience to talk about their story, who they are, and things like that. This is great, but literally everybody I've spoken to tell me that 90% of the visitors who come to the site don't care. Like, they don't even scroll down. They'll come, they'll see the image, they'll see the value proposition, and if they've got a nice call to action like shop or shop now or something like that, that's the button that gets the most clicks. So don't lose this opportunity. I know you want to tell your story, do so, but give the people who just want to get that item the option to do that as well, so that you're giving your customer the control rather than you trying to dedicate how they should experience your site. Obviously, it's a balance. You do want to curate it, but give these options to your customer. And then you've got this opportunity now to really introduce a little bit more detail. So for instance, in your value proposition, I'll show you some examples in a little bit. But show them what are the products you have. Just give them a really quick view. This is where maybe some tips from Rishi can really come in terms of how you do some copy to introduce what you're selling. And then obviously your footer. This is a really, I think, like probably an area that's not respected as much as it could, because you could put in any links that you really want to put in, but you're not sure where, into your footer. So for instance, if you've got a nice story and you think it's useful, you could feature that up here. But if you think it's not so important, you can put the story down here, like the about us. So I'll just whiz through some really nice examples here. I don't want to take too much time, but you see very clearly here that they've done a really good job where they've got a great image which visually speaks to the visual cortex, and then you've got a nice bit of copy that tells you exactly what it is, and then we've got a nice call to action. Same thing here. This is Blenders Eyewear. They're a very large company. They're doing very well, and you can see that they've opted to be a little bit more coy with their copy, so they're not really saying it's sunglasses or shades, but it's pretty obvious from the image what it is. And they're just, that they're trying to be sort of a little bit more casual, which is really their brand. We have you covered. And again, very good call to action, because here you can see it's really important, because my assumption here is that the biggest customer segment are probably women, which is why you have the image here. But they don't want to alienate men, so they found a very smart way of doing that by saying, "Hey, shop men." So this is a really good opportunity for you to be creative with the brand that you make, right? So, going on to the next slide, what I wanted to really highlight here is that I've seen way too many examples where people do slideshows. So, for instance, here you can see it's a static image, but there's quite a few. But and if you're listening, you know who you are. This thing keeps moving, and there's been countless studies done. This is from a Google UX study actually, where they show you that position one is the one that gets the most clicks, and even worse, we've seen so many banner ads that are really annoying. Studies have shown that the moment you do too much animation or movement, people think it's an ad and they don't even look at it. So don't kill that attention. This is the first thing that people see. Please don't do automated slideshows. Keep it a static image. Something which we encourage a lot with our customers is do grids so that it's still in the control of the customer so that they can see the grid of images. But please don't do this. And then the other one, we talked about a clear and prominent search bar. This is an example. I think this is pretty clear, so I don't want to belabor the point, but it's a good way of, it's a nice design where you can see the search bar. And then obviously when you have this nav bar, which is important, it's nice to show good product images as people are moving along. So that, again, remember what I said, your homepage is really try to encourage that click, and hopefully, you're giving people more and more reasons to click. And then the other thing is you try to be as curated as possible, because now in the nav bar, you're going to show a lot of collections, especially if you have many different types of products. Again, you want to keep it as organized as possible, because the nav bar has a very big risk of getting to have way too many links, because it's so easy that I want to show everything I have. But you can, but try to keep it organized. So in this case, like, in terms of my eye, I see adult collection is here, kids, accessories. It's easy for me to read, even though there's so many links, right? So with that, let's move on to our copywriting guru himself, Rishi. Over to you, sir.
Awesome. So yeah, that was really good actually, and I intentionally didn't listen to I didn't go through your notes before the presentation because I really wanted to kind of get the same experience that people would have as they're watching this. So really good job, and I think the things you brought out are very actionable and they're based on research. That's awesome. So now that we've got the containers, taken care of, I want to shift the focus a little bit towards copywriting. And before we even do that, I think it's important to recognize this big paradox, which is you're not the only person that is trying to talk to your audience. In fact, there are 30, as human beings, we're making 35,000 choices in a day. And just think about that for a moment. That is a staggering number. And it seems, in fact, comical. It seems unbelievable, but really our brains are being inundated with choices, and these could be microscopic choices. These could be, most often they are actually not important choices, but all of these choices are creating what we call cognitive load, and they are a tax essentially. And so our brains have figured out these shortcuts to get from where we are to where we need to be while we're navigating this labyrinth of choices. And as marketers, if you can understand these shortcuts and the formula for these shortcuts, you essentially can unlock the buyer's brain. And that's really what we're trying to focus on. So we have a framework of 13 ideas, copywriting approaches. I'm just going to talk about 3 here. So if you can move forward, I can jump to the first one. So let me talk about the 3. So the 3 things that I want you guys all to focus on. The first one is avoid statements that sound too good to be true. This seems very obvious, but you'll be amazed at how many aspects of your sales pitch just simply don't cross the BS test, right? You want to really be mindful about this. There's a lot of things that we talk about that we just kind of state as being fact, and we need to kind of, as a skeptical buyer, we need to be aware of some of these points that we're making are going to be there's going to be resistance, and so we need to really be mindful of anything that we're saying that could be viewed as too good to be true. And I'll show you an example. The next one is that we know this from buyer psychology. People are drawn to the underdog. We want to kind of see people, we want to support people, we want to root for people that have beaten odds. And every entrepreneur has beaten odds. Running a business is incredibly hard. If you're doing it, you've beaten incredible odds. And yet we don't talk about those odds. And we don't talk about the difficulty in inventing new product categories. We don't talk about the difficulty in launching a business. We don't talk about the difficulty in competing against giants and incumbents in our industry. And the fact is, unfortunately, by not doing that, you're actually missing out on an opportunity to connect with your audience. So, and the third strategy we'll talk about is that we need motivation to break habit. We are extremely, even though we aspire to buy new products and get new habits and to lose 15 pounds, we are the black hole of habit is so strong, and so we really need to figure out ways through copywriting to give people the nudge to break habits. So let's now talk about each of these examples. If you can move forward to the next screen. All right, so avoid statements that are too good to be true. I'm going to show you an example. So we know that shoppers like obviously discounts, but let's imagine a scenario where you are giving a 74% discount. Now, on the surface, you might say this is obviously a no-brainer. If I can afford to give a 74% discount, then of course I'm going to get tons of sales. But actually, that's not true. When you give a small discount, yes, that's true if it's a 15, 20% discount. But when you get to a 74% discount or an 80% discount or even a 60% discount, the conversation, the mental chatter that is happening in the buyer's mind starts shifting. Now they start wondering about things like, is this item about to be phased out? Is there a defect in this product that I'm not even aware of? Is this company about to shut down? Are they kind of liquidating their inventory? So you can see how, even though from our perspective, a 74% discount was a no-brainer, from the perception side of it, it actually can be viewed as being negative. So we've done studies where we've actually found that after a certain point, your conversion rates of that product page start going down as the discount goes up, which of course is the exact opposite of what we'd want. So I'm going to show you one example of how you can actually overcome this if you're truly giving a 74% discount. So if you can just move on to the next page, I'll just show you. So the idea here is that we've added a call to action. So on the product page, wherever you are giving that discount, you say, why are we giving this crazy discount? And when you click on it, there's a pop-up that appears. Now, this is really important, is that we're not trying to show this message to everyone by default. We're trying to actually show them only to the people that actually are concerned about this discount, right? So we talked about the people that had concerns. We're addressing that. So if you move to the next screen, I'll just quickly show the message. Okay, so here's the pop-up. We just kind of put this together. We're looking at an example of a jewelry website. So it says running a retail store, and it's an online business. So we're trying to give people an explanation for why we have incredible prices. So it says running a retail store is extremely expensive, and it talks about all the costs that are involved. And it says by eliminating those, we end up saving. And the thing is, and so now this is where kind of the copywriting comes into play. It says, but here's the thing, only 7% of the people in the US know us. And so what we're saying, our value proposition or our kind of pitch here is to say that instead of investing more in advertising, we would love to use our loyal customers, our new customers, as a way to get for them to introduce their friends. And that is why we're giving a discount. So not only have we justified the mechanics around how we can give a discount by removing all these unnecessary costs and getting rid of the middleman, we're also now kind of looping in that discount as an incentive to the user to actually make to include their friends. What happens is that this is actually a social contract. So I'm telling the user, I'm giving you this discount and I'm expecting you to bring a couple of friends. So now as a buyer, my focus has shifted from the fact of, why am I getting this discount? This seems too good to be true, to, oh, I know why I'm getting the discount, because these guys are trying to bribe me to bring my friends in. Now, here's the thing. I may actually never bring more friends to their brand, but the conversation has already been shifted. So we've taken something that might have been perceived as being negative, and we know it's being perceived as negative because those people are already clicking this button. By clicking that, why am I getting this crazy discount button? The user is already telling us that I don't understand why I'm getting this. Like, what is the reason? What am I missing? And so we've taken that negative thought and made it positive. All right. So moving on to the next next strategy. So we know that people root for people that have beaten the odds. David versus Goliath story. And this is something that we need to really play on because it has an amazing effect on conversion rates. I'm going to show you a really clever example. If you can move to the next screen. Okay, so this is a company called Skiplagged, and they essentially help travelers find super cheap airline tickets. And obviously, I'm sure no one's going to the website right now, but I think eventually they will. It's a very popular website. But what's interesting is that they've positioned themselves as David versus Goliath. If you pay attention to this homepage, and we've actually got another screenshot, if you go to the next screen, that's a little zoomed in, what you'll see is if you look at that line below the headline, it says, our flights are so cheap, United sued us, but we won. This is a really, really good example of positioning yourself as David versus Goliath. And why is it in their homepage? You know, Shravan talked about how important the homepage is. The reason why this is on the homepage is because this is exactly what users are looking to find. These are the kind of stories that really inspire people. And so you may not have the exact same story, but you've overcome a lot of difficulties, whether it's designing the product, whether it's getting the shipping prices down, whether it's kind of, designing a product line, whether it's, all of these things. These are amazing stories. And if you can figure out a way to kind of position yourself as having overcome odds, which you have, it's going to have an amazing effect on conversion rates. Okay, moving forward, I know I'm going a little slow. So here is the other thing is that, and this is the final strategy, is that we all need motivation to break habits. And as marketers, one of the big mistakes we make is we keep on looking at our competitors and trying to contrast our solutions against competitors by saying we're better. The truth is that that is only a small fraction of what's happening. Really, the bigger thing is two things. Number one is that people are stuck in their habits. It's easy for them not to buy anything or do anything. And of course, the other one is that they've already got workarounds. It's not like you've invented a new job that didn't exist. That job always existed. It's just that I have used, for example, if you are a project management software, it's not like I'm not managing projects before you came along. I'm still doing it. I'm doing it in an inefficient way, but I still have a workaround. And so as a marketer, if you can understand those workarounds, you can actually have a conversation that gets people to realize how using your software or solution is a great idea. And we have two examples, one for each. All right, so this is an example of a scenario where the user is pretending like they don't even have a problem. This is what I mean by, hey, why should I buy this? I'm pretty happy where I am. Well, here's the weird thing, right? It's kind of strange because they're on our website, they've done a Google search. So clearly they do want to make progress in their life, but we need to overcome this bridge because they understand that I can just continue doing what I'm doing. And we talked about choices, right? 35,000 choices. Why would they want to add 35,000 plus one to their list? So they don't have any incentive to go through this mental turmoil. So it's our job to communicate that. So imagine a scenario where you are selling, in this example, you are selling long-term food storage. You may not have heard of this category, but if you Google it, you'll be amazed at how many companies. It's a multi-billion dollar company business. And so the idea here is people buy food. These are freeze-dried food that have 25-year shelf life. They buy this food, 6 months supply, 8 months supply, 12 months supply, keep it in their basements or keep it in their home. And the idea is that if there's uncertainty in the future, maybe there's a shortage of something, maybe for whatever reason there's an emergency and you can't access food, then you have this food that you can prepare. But the thing is that when the user is on this page, one of their number one thoughts that they're thinking about is that, well, I haven't dealt with this emergency. I know I need it. I know it's important, but I haven't dealt with it. So I'm just going to ignore it. So we came up with a line of copy that is specifically surgically designed to attack that thought. So on the next screen, we'll show that. So it says, it's tempting to hope no one has to be in an emergency situation. And 9 times out of 10, that's the case for most of us. So there's a lot of things we've done over here, but the key thing we've done over here is the closing statement where it says 9 times out of 10, that's the case for most of us. So what that means is that 1 out of 10 times you actually will be in the situation. And that's enough of a nudge. You don't have to shove the user. You just have to nudge them. And if you can use an implied message, which is what this is, versus a stated message would have been saying that 10% of the time you're screwed. That's a stated message. Consumers are going to discount that. But if you actually say that 9 times out of 10, you're totally fine, you've actually left a little blank space that the user has to fill in, which is that 1 out of 10 times I could get screwed. And if the user is filling in the blank, and if that process is a punchline for your product, that's the best way to convert shoppers. So that's the basic idea. And on the next slide, we'll talk about this other scenario, which is people have workarounds, right? So for example, imagine if I'm trying to sell a hybrid adult bike. Well, it's not like people that are buying my bike don't have, maybe they're working out in other ways. People buy bikes, for example, to work out. So they might be they might be right now running, for example. That's my competition. It's not the other bike. It's the fact that they are running outdoors. So the question is, if we want to sell them on the bike, let's try to attack that alternative. So on the next page, we've crafted a line of copy. Um, so like I said, people are running on the treadmill, or people are running outside. So our idea as a marketer is actually not to just talk about how amazing our bike is, but to actually talk about the fact that if you are an adult, because we know that's an adult bike, so it's obviously for adults, that if you're running outside, it puts a lot of pressure on your joints, right? Isn't that something that would reduce if you're using a bike? And yet, and this might seem obvious, but it's really interesting because I've seen hundreds, not hundreds, but dozens and dozens of bike product pages for adults, and because I'm in the process of buying one for myself, and I find it amazing, not a single one of them actually talked about the benefits of biking over running or running on a treadmill. Even though that's a significant competitor, they really focus on why their product is better than all other bikes, and that's great, but that's not your entire audience. So I think I think with that we've covered it. Just go to I think that covers it, right? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rishi. That was amazing. So, moving on, I think this is a very important topic, and it's really linked as well to what Rishi was talking about in terms of copywriting, which is that, if you look at that V1, how do you get to V4.5? So, he's given you some really good tips now on getting started with how to think about your copy. And now let's talk about how, once you've got that V1, how we can bring that to 4.5 as quick or 5 as quickly as possible. So there's many ways that you can get feedback from customers, right? So you can have a questionnaire. It can be on your website. Maybe after they purchase, you can ask them a quick, survey. Um, One thing that's also very useful is if you have a lot of support lines available, like chat, email, or calling. This is actually a very implicit way that people can give you feedback, because if someone is having a problem with something, or something is frustrating or they don't understand, then yes, the easy way to say is solve that question. But a more deeper way of looking at it is that you haven't solved, there's an unmet need here. Maybe they are doing something which your website is not currently answering well enough. So your goal should be try to use these points as much as you can to go back and improve the copy, improve the website, so that you have less of those questions. Not less requests, because you need to love the request. But if you're having the same request over and over again all the time, it means that you are not learning. um, and then these are all like very good opportunities for you to review your unique selling point, or your value proposition. What is it that the customer values the most? And then this is a little bit of a tough one, and I would advise, maybe if it's a customer or visitor who you know very well, because usually when you launch, it's a natural. Actually, you might share your website with your friends and family. You can try something where you give them maybe 10% off or some kind of reward, where you ask them to record themselves buying from your website. What does that process look like? And a very key point here is ask them to speak out loud what their process is. Oh, I'm looking for a bike. I guess I need to go and do a search. Where's the search bar? Oh, it's right here. Something like that. Because then you're really getting the feel of what a person who is not familiar with your website, because unfortunately, as entrepreneurs, the person who's most familiar with the website is you. So if somebody asks you, why is the search bar, or why is this, or why is that, you say, yeah, it's obviously over here. But the first time person does not. And this is a really valuable opportunity for you to understand that. There's some the thing with customer surveys is that you need to find a creative way that makes sense for you. So this is an example from this brand, Common Sense Coffee. Again, somebody we talked to recently. And they do something really smart. In their menu, they've got a link here saying free coffee. Now, who's not going to click on that? It doesn't say survey, it doesn't say tell us your experience, it just says free coffee. And I've just linked one part of it here, where they over here they'll explain, every month we give away free coffee if we select someone to we select somebody to do the survey with. But once you click on it, they have a survey, and they'll tell you, look, if you do this for every month, we give away something, and give us your feedback. You have to be a little bit careful with these, because the moment you're saying it's free coffee, people might be a little bit biased to try to make you happy. So you should really adjust the way you do the copy to say that the most useful feedback, or maybe something which tells us something which we actually implement. That's the person who gets the free coffee, rather than making it seem like make me as happy as possible, because that's the worst kind of feedback. So be a little careful with this, but it's a very effective one if you can get it right. The second one is another entrepreneur we spoke to, again, very smart. They use live chat, and you can see here that they use Facebook Messenger. Again, this was very smart because he's actually based in Egypt, and a lot of like people in the Middle East and North Africa use Facebook, so he picked that one. But what he noticed is that, so he sells socks, and what he noticed is that people weren't there to buy only one pair of socks. When you buy socks, you actually buy a whole bunch, and that's what he noticed. And he also noticed that people were asking him questions like, "Can you send this to? Can I order this for me and my friends?" So he responded to that by creating this thing called packs, and this is now on his homepage. So even before people go to message, he used that example of like learning from what the customers are actually doing and how they like to buy, and he built that into the website. So again, a very easy, I hope, like to understand example of how you can use feedback to make your homepage even better. The next thing is, we look at this idea of recording the user. So I have a little bit of a story here. So this is a Chilean website. They're called Depto51. And they actually, I was speaking to their founder, and she was telling me a very interesting story. So this is actually from a product carousel. So, there's many, many of them. I just took one. And she was getting a lot of complaints that people were clicking on the product and they were seeing more products, and people were really mad. So for instance, they were clicking on this Selknam book, Libro means book, and they were not seeing the book, they were seeing more products. What was happening is that in her design, she had the product title like this, but the collection or the brand name was underlined. And so the younger folks understand that it doesn't have to be underlined to be a link, so they click on the image or the title. But the older folks look for the underline because that tells them that this is a link. So the older folks were going and clicking on the brand name. Now, she would have never realized this if she didn't see it happening. And then she thought, so now if you go to their website, like you won't see this underlined. I actually had to fake this just to put this on the slideshow where I underlined it myself. But this is a very good example of something so small that definitely helps your conversion on the homepage, which you would have never noticed unless you saw it happening or someone actually complained and told you about it. So with that, hopefully you get an idea of how to get more feedback from customers. If you guys have other methods that you think are helpful, please put them in the comments. I think that this is an area which we all can learn from each other. So for the final topic, I want to talk about how to treat your customers as individuals. Full disclosure, we actually do personalization. So I've been trying to be very careful here not to mention like anything that we do as a product, but I just want to introduce you to the concept. So the idea with all of the stuff which we talked about in terms of being very simple with your value proposition and all of those things, it actually becomes much harder to do when you have a lot of products, because now you don't know what is the message to focus on. So if you look at that Blenders eyewear, they're a very big business, but they sell sunglasses. They do have some ski goggles and things like that, which are another business, but you could say 95% of the business is um, sunglasses. But imagine someone who is selling, I don't know, baby products. This is a very easy example, because now suddenly you've got so many different types of customers. You've got people who are expectant parents. They buy very different things. You might have people who are buying gifts for a baby shower. Again, very different. And then, as you know, like what you'd buy for your child at 6 months, 1 year, 2 years is totally different. So what do you do? So this is where you run this risk, right? Now, the immediate almost instinct here is to crowd your homepage. You try to please everybody, so you try to put as many things as you can, so that you try to say, oh, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do that. And so, obviously don't do it because it doesn't work. This is a very common, this is a very famous psychology test where, I mean, it has been changed with, jams and ice cream flavors, but the concept is the same. They tried something like putting 27 different flavors on one table and six on the other. The one with the six sold much more that day than the 27. Because the thing is, when you crowd, I think Rishi talked about this in terms of 35,000 decisions you have to make. If you make the decision really hard, people will just decide not to make a decision at all. And so this is the lesson to be learned here, right? And it has a real world impact. So there's a company called Good Firms that they did some research, I think, across 2,000 websites. And basically, when they saw something too crowded and they couldn't really decide what was this website doing and who does it serve, this is a staggering number. 85% just left. And this is not something any of us want when we're building a homepage experience, right? So there are about three ways to solve this problem, right? The first way is you do you if you have the luxury of knowing that, yes, I have many different customer segments, but really this one segment, like maybe 80-90% of my business is coming from this, then feel free to just focus on that. And then you can add the other segments everywhere else. A really easy example here is some of these fashion sites. You'll notice that probably women make up 70 to 80% maybe of their sales. So you will see, like, as a man, it's something which, I personally get annoyed about, because I always see I have to do 2 clicks to get to the men's stuff, whereas for women it's much faster. But there's a very clear reason to it, because if 80% of your customers are women, then it makes sense to make it as easy as possible for that 80%, right? The next thing people do is, a next stage is, you just make separate landing pages. And I'll show you an example of that. And this is really effective, because now suddenly, if you've got 5 segments, it's not very hard to copy your homepage and make 5 versions and just change the images and change the text and everything like that to really speak to that individual. And then the last one is where you go into an automated personalization tool, which is obviously that area where when it's too many or you want it to be automated, that's where it's going to be very helpful. So I'll show you an example of this landing page. This is from ASOS. I think it's probably one of the most famous e-commerce brands there is. If you go to asos.com/women, you see this value prop with the prominent picture of a woman, and with men it looks very different. But obviously, if you go to asos.com, you're going to see the picture of a woman. Now, in terms of the pros, ads and SEO can now bring traffic directly to the appropriate page, right? So, if I write a blog post now on great men's fashion, instead of making the link to asos.com, it makes sense for me to send you to asos.com/men. Same thing with ads. So if I'm doing an ad, it makes much more sense to send them to the landing page rather than the homepage. And if you're not doing this right now, if you've got many customers, I really strongly urge you to do this. This doesn't take you very long, and it really improves the ROI from your ads, because what people click on, they expect to see when they arrive at your homepage. The problem with this approach is that you will still have irrelevant content on your website, because this is only going to affect the first time visitor. So if I clicked on the Facebook ad and went to asos.com/men, great. But now I'm going to click around and look through. And when I come back, I'm still going to see a lot of pictures and a lot of text which doesn't apply to me. And especially if you've acquired me as a customer, I know who you are. I might come back thinking, hey, I saw some really cool men's clothes there. And I type asos.com on the browser, and now I'm seeing things which are not relevant to me, right? Now, I'm sure asos.com is doing more advanced personalization. It's just an example here of, if let's say you are not and you're only doing the landing page approach. This brings us to this idea of personalization. And this is really the only thing I want to say. It's that rather than creating multiple landing pages, what you do is you just create your one homepage, and you make your e-commerce site adapt to what the customer is trying to do. So for instance, um, if I if so let's say this lady saw a Facebook ad for baby products, and then when she lands and she's exploring, she sees a homepage that looks like this. Maybe somebody else was Googling for bedroom products and they came in and they saw a bedroom product. Now they come back even next week, 2 weeks from now, they see a website that looks really focused on bedroom stuff. And then, the third example, maybe you have an email campaign and you send some people, maybe you're using Klaviyo or MailChimp or what have you, and you send a campaign to people are interested in, say, a new promotion on bathroom fittings. Now, because they clicked on that link, it makes sense that the next time they come back, even organically, you show them more content to do with bathroom stuff. So with that, I'm pretty proud the fact that we've just managed to end on the 45-minute mark. I do want to take some time to talk about where you can contact Rishi and I. Uh, so this is Rishi's contact, and this is our contact. If you have any questions, we would. I think I speak for Rishi when I say we would be very happy to respond to them. And with that, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this. And this is goodbye from us from now. And leave any comments on the on the webinar. And if you have any questions, then we'll be happy to answer them. Rishi, I don't know if you want to have any final words.
No, I think this has been really good, and I think excited to do this with you, and I think hopefully people will get some. Even if people pick up one or two nuggets that are actionable, it's about taking baby steps, So I think just awareness of it and then starting to work on it gradually. I think that's a great start for people.
Amazing. All right, Rishi and everybody, thank you so much for joining us and your valuable time. See you guys around, and we'll post another update for the next webinar that we do, and we look forward to seeing you guys there. Bye bye.